when you talk about bringing AI to something like warehousing, there is a huge component of change management. People need to learn what the future needs to be sometimes. And that's part of what we deliver as well. We consider ourselves partner to every organization we work with, not experts that need to tell people how to do their job.
Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the #1 voice of supply chain. Join us as we share critical news, key insights, and real supply chain leadership from across the globe, one conversation at a time.
Hey, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Scott Luton and Jake Barr with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's show. Hey, Mr. John Wayne of Global Supply Chain. Jake, how you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. We're going to have a great time today.
We are going to have an outstanding conversation here today, folks. We're going to dial it in on the logistics problem no one talks about, how disjointed tech is wreaking havoc on distribution. Now, folks, I don't have to tell you, our distribution centers and warehouses have no shortage of challenges. Think labor shortages, ever-increasing customer demands and expectations, disparate automation and tech that doesn't play nice in the sandbox, all that and much more. But the good news, and there's always good news if you go looking for it, there's a better path forward for your organization, and especially our favorite part, your people. And that, by and large, is what we're going to be talking about here today with an innovative supply chain entrepreneur who's doing great work out in industry. Jake, should be a great and a timely show, huh?
Absolutely. It's wonderful when you get someone who's not only a technologist at the leading edge, but a supply chain geek who really understands the work at a down on the floor level.
I'm with you, Jake. We have a very unique guest here today. And hey, if Jake Barr is singing your praises, you're doing something right. So folks, stick around for a great conversation. It's going to offer up tons of actionable insights by the container load. So with all much ado, I'm going to welcome in our outstanding guest here today. Keith Moore is the Chief Executive Officer for AutoScheduler.AI, where he is laser focused on bringing the future of technology into the warehousing industry. Now, in this role, Keith and the team work with a bevy of top 10 companies in the consumer goods industry, the beverage sector, distribution sectors, and all along the way, he's received numerous recognitions and accolades, including being recognized, get this, by Heart Energy Magazine as an Energy Innovator of the Year for 2020. Man, even better, he holds a variety of patents in the fields of neural architecture. I'm going to figure out what that is maybe today, and supply chain planning, one of our favorite topics. You're going to enjoy learning from him here throughout the episode. I can promise you that. So please join me in welcoming in Keith Moore, CEO with AutoScheduler. Hey, Keith, how you doing?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. So Jake, we were talking pre-show. I had a chance to connect with Keith up there at ProMat where they had 54,000 people. And I'm going to tell you, Jake, you had to get a number and get valet parking to work your way in the booth at AutoScheduler. Have you seen Keith in action, Jake?
I have indeed. I've used them for years, and I swear by the product.
And that's high praise, ringing endorsement. I got to ask you, I got to say one more thing about Chicago, though, that we learned. Keith was so busy that he didn't have a chance to enjoy all the delicious food that the wonderful city of Chicago offers. Keith, is that right?
So yeah, what ended up happening is, you wake up, ProMat starts early, you've got meetings in the morning, right? Catch coffee with somebody, then you're at the show and you're bouncing, trying to connect with, as many of the 54,000 people as you can. And then when the afternoon, evening rolls around, you end up having event number 1, event number 2, event number 3. And so I pretty much survived on hors d'oeuvres and water the whole show. Yeah.
No way. A techie in Chicago can always use DoorDash to get Chicago deep dish delivered right to your desk.
Yeah. But have you been to the McCormick Center? You get so lost in there?
Yes.
That is true. That is a major venue. Well, hey, if you happen to miss Keith at ProMat, take heart. You can still catch up with him and his incredible team at Gartner in May at one of the best supply chain trade shows around, Supply Chain Symposium. So stay tuned. We'll talk more about that towards the end of today's show. Okay. So Jake, we're getting to know Keith. You already know Keith a little bit. I'm still getting to know him better and better. And I want to start with a fun warm-up question. We asked him earlier conversationally before we started the show if he had 6 hours to himself on a weekend where he didn't have to worry about business or family stuff. It was his time. He said, number one, I never get 6 hours. But he said, in Fantasyland, if I did, he'd be smoking and grilling, hiking, and he wouldn't be taking any naps. He's not a nap guy. So Keith, on that, in that that hypothetical situation, what do you like to smoke and grill given the time?
Man, so during COVID, I actually ended up buying an offset smoker because I realized I don't actually need to smoke meat. I needed hobbies that weren't work or just spending time with my kids, which I love doing, right? But I need hobbies for myself.
That's right.
And so with an offset, like a full brisket, I'm in Austin, Texas. So full brisket takes 18 to 20 hours if you do it well. So I do brisket burn ends. That's kind of something I like doing that you can do faster. You can do that in 6 to 8 hours. And so that if I get to choose what I'm smoking, it'll be brisket burn ends and the flat of the brisket.
Oh, Jake, that sounds absolutely delicious, huh?
He's shortchanging me on meat, though. I'm just saying, the burn ends are great, but it's just a little bit of meat.
We just had some burnt ends over the weekend at one of our favorite local places, and Keith and Jake. It is a thing of beauty, especially when you nail it. We'll have to get Keith's recipe later. One other thing, hiking. So your home base is Austin, Texas.
Yep.
If you were to get some time, get out hiking, where do you like to go?
So in Austin, because we're by hill country, there's a bunch of fantastic areas within 30 minutes. It's great. If I have my full druthers on where I get to go, I'm flying to Calgary. I'm driving over to Banff National Park, and I am taking a trip where all I do is hike every day.
Okay, man, I like it. Jake, that's got your ring of your rubber stamp approval.
No,
huh?
I'll actually watch him vicariously remotely while I sit on the beach with a drink.
No truer words. Good stuff, Keith and Jake. It's important to find some kind of way to recharge the batteries and take a breath, especially at the pace of business these days. But let's switch gears. Keith, we got so much to get into. You and your team been on the move in recent years. I'm looking forward to learning a lot more about your story. But let's start with some little extra context. I want to learn more about your professional journey, especially starting with what you did prior to the current venture. Tell us a little more.
Yeah. So engineer by training, went to the esteemed University of Tennessee. So I am, a University of Tennessee everything fan. Sorry, Jake. And so graduated, knew I wanted to start a company. Like that's been my career aspiration. I was the kid in high school that would find a way to escape school, go buy a bunch of pizzas and sell them for $1 a slice in the cafeteria. Like that was actually what I did in high school. So knew I wanted to go on that career path, worked in tech for a few years, had a really cool job where I was doing this data acquisition control system work and realized that there was this big gap in the market where people had all of this data and nobody knew how to use it very well. And this was working with companies like SpaceX, right? Cutting edge organizations. So in 2013, 2014, I got really into this new thing called machine learning. And if you're a technologist, technically it is not new, but it was an emerging category thanks to compute. So ended up jumping on with a startup as one of the very first employees there here in Austin, Texas, to learn how to start a company. Because I'd done a few, side hustle companies where you'd started them and, hey, turns out I didn't understand product market fit, or I didn't understand customer acquisition, or I didn't understand the right way to do things. I realized, hey, I need to go learn from either a seasoned entrepreneur or somebody who was awesome at it. And that's exactly what I did. So I jumped on at a company called Spark Cognition, went through Series A to Series D with them, became a unicorn, focused on pure play machine learning and artificial intelligence. So I've been in the space for over 10 years at this point. As you mentioned, it is a bit of an expertise of mine. After a while, felt like I was ready to go start a company. And while exploring a few different opportunities in Austin, ended up actually working with my family to start AutoScheduler.
Well, Keith, we're going to get back to AutoScheduler in just a second, but I'm fascinated with what you shared there. And Jake, in particular, that gap in the market he was talking about, that sticks out in what he shared. And then secondly, how he saw a gap in his own skill portfolio, I'll call it, and purposefully went out and not only created value for that company, but wanted to fill that gap for himself to go out and found and lead a company. But what'd you hear there, Jake?
Well, what I heard was what I've learned about Keith for many years is it's one thing to have the brilliance of the technical insight, right? The reality is he could translate that because he understood the mechanics of what the domain is in the supply chain space, right? And he also appreciated, I think early on, because of where he got his schooling, the disjointed silos of how the supply chain operated, right? And so if you think about it, the new greenfield frontier is the application of AI across all of these disparate silos that have grown up over 10, 15, some cases 20 years. And quite frankly, one, they don't talk to each other. Two, they don't have a way of being able to blend, bringing the information together. And three, they really struggle with trying to figure out what the consequence is of these flows, right? And so that's where Keith and his team have really stepped into a void and are doing great things.
Well, so that's a great segue, Jake, and I appreciate that that void you are speaking of, because I bet that and that gap you identified out in the marketplace and your unique blend of skills and talents, I bet all of that rolls up with some other stuff into why you started the business. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So for me, why the business got started is there was, and what we do is very focused, right? There's a lot of great companies in supply chain. The supply chain tech world's fairly small. I've learned that since I've come into it. And we are really good at what we do because we are laser focused on a particular set of problems. And that problem is why we started the business. It actually started as a consulting engagement for Procter Gamble. So the question was, P&G said, we have this problem at all of our facilities. We have these great performing sites and we have these poor performing sites. And this is across their plant warehouses as well as their distribution centers, right? There's a distinction between the two. One has production, one doesn't. And the problem is we don't know why. We have spent all of the money on standardization of, technology. So we have the same warehouse management systems running at all of them. We have the same process at all of them. How we run the sites is the same. And we have the same hiring practices. So the people, the process, and the technology should all be the same. But for some reason, we have this big disparity in performance. And some sites are unproductive. Some sites are struggling with service levels. And so we came in, and part of the realization there was the big unlock for them was in their management team. So the people that there's, in a warehouse, you might have hundreds of people. If it's a plant warehouse and, plant, you might have thousands of people. There is a group of 10 to 20 people that make decisions on how they want to execute for the minute, the hour, the shift, the day, and the week. And if those people are not in perfect sync on how they want to operate and how they deal with disruptions, you end up with a very disjointed operation that lacks productivity, struggles with service, et cetera. And so we started to solve that problem for P&G. And can we just build a software that harmonizes all of these different data sources they have between, warehouse data, labor data, manufacturing data, so that's raw materials and finished goods. And can we give them kind of the Lord of the Rings style, one plan to rule them all on how they execute their workflow? So whether it's somebody who's 30 years on the job or 30 days on the job, that decision maker knows exactly what they need to do next and how they need to go about it.
Now, an incredible build on top of that, which again, because of his domain expertise, he understands it at a very granular level, is the so what, right? Because you get all that, you provide it to the individual, but you have to have context, right? And so the wonderful thing that I've seen with Keith and his team is they provide a context of here's what's going on. Here's why the bottlenecks are occurring. Here's how you could unplug that cog that's stopping the flow. Here are the trade-off alternatives. And it gives them a holistic picture instead of someone trying to manage from their gut independently, location by location, site by site, even if they might have 7/10 of the information available to them at the time they really need to make the call at one location and only half of the information at the other one. So it creates a level playing field for how they're able to ingest and look at all of the changes and all the chaos that's happening.
And Jake, doing it by the gut in your example you shared isn't real scalable, is it?
It's not. Now, there's a great thing. And obviously, look, we love the gut intuition, right? Because you build that up over time. The problem is it's variable, right? It's all subjective based on what that individual, he or she, has had the opportunity to experience. So it's a great spot to apply artificial intelligence because you fill in the blind spots that they haven't had the opportunity to get whacked with up against the head to go, well, I'm about to make this call. And if I do, I think it's a good one, but I'm basing it based on what I know, right? Or what I can understand.
So, all told, Keith, go back and kind of finish, put a period on the story about the why behind AutoScheduler.AI. It's, if I've got the story right, you solved the problems that P&G were having across their ecosystem between distribution centers and warehouses and said, hey, we've got something here that we can productize and help so many other organizations that are feeling these same pains. Is that right, Keith?
That's exactly it. Is we own the intellectual property for everything that we had built and the algorithms that we had built to solve these problems. And so it was, let's take this to market. If P&G has the problem, it's a guarantee just about everybody else has the problem, given how forward-thinking P&G is in supply chain practice. And so we launched the business in August of 2020. So we are almost 5 years old. It sure feels a lot longer than that. Like I know it's hard to see on the camera, right? But the gray hair is real. Almost 5 years old as a business, and we've been doing really well, growing primarily in that, food and beverage manufacturing space, consumer goods manufacturing, and moving into retail and grocery as well.
It does seem, I can't remember when we first met, but it seems like you've been doing this like 25 years. So to think you and your team have accomplished all this in 5 years, that is remarkable. All right. So Keith and Jake, we got a lot more to get into, but where I want to go next is kind of the main central topic of today's show. Again, the logistics problem no one talks about, how disjointed tech is wreaking absolute havoc on distribution. So I want to start with this though, Keith. What do you point to in terms of why folks don't talk about this problem?
Yeah, so disjointed tech, everybody, as soon as you say it, everybody's like, yep, I know what he's talking about. But when you look at a supply chain, most companies think like, well, wait a second, I have an ERP, I have a planning system, I have a TMS, I've invested in a WMS, I've invested in, maybe I'm more advanced. I have an LMS, YMS, automation, maybe I've invested in this real-time transportation visibility thing, to use the Gartner term for it. Obviously, because I've made all those investments, it all talks together. And so nobody talks about it because everybody thinks that when they make an investment, it automatically plugs into all of the other investments that they've made. When the ugly reality is we still operate in a heavily siloed world where I could probably count, I won't say on one hand, but on two hands, the Fortune 100 organizations I've worked with that have a very good centralized, harmonized data strategy on how to pull all of this data into one place. So it is kind of how everybody's gotten used to operating in the operation space. And people are so busy firefighting and logistics that they never come up for air to think, if we have all the data in one place from all of our systems, we wouldn't have this problem to begin with.
So Jake, he paints that picture, that ugly reality. Your thoughts, Jake?
The ugly reality is because of the size, scale, and scope of what most supply chain organizations represent and manage on a daily basis, they're so deep down in the woods of just trying to put out the latest fire and commotion. Building 3 is backed up 4 hours because of some logistical delay. Building 2 had a delay in the packaging materials arriving on time to support the finish operation over in building 1, right? Building 1 and 3, the stuff has to merge in order to go out to do fulfillment. Wait, okay. Well, what am I making my decisions off of? Am I making it off of independently the updates I got out of what's going on over in building 3 with the logistics delays? Am I doing it because I just gotten a production schedule update? Am I doing it because I just got, guess what? Susie, Joe, and Jack are out on illness. And so we're 8 trucks behind on loading. I mean, They're independent, but they're being managed today because of the chaos and the size and the scale as independent activities, as opposed to realizing, no, they're a whole set of activities that you need to look at and make decisions over the top of for how to orchestrate the music.
So, Keith, based on what you and Jake both are sharing there, this ugly reality, this disjointedness, this lack of harmony, at the top of the list, what is it costing organizations?
The easiest answer is margin, right? A supply chain for most companies, some see it as a competitive advantage, but to all organizations, it is also a cost center, right? And what we end up doing in supply chains to account for this disjointedness of tech is we end up building buffers in places we don't necessarily need one. The optimal is like I say I need a product at this location delivered right then. There's a huge number of touches and flows that needs to be accounted for to get it there. And the intent is like it just magically shows up. What ends up happening, though, is we end up building these stages, these kind of safety nets inside of our supply chain to make sure that we're able to support that need at, the cost of carrying inventory, at the cost of excess labor, at the cost of automation systems we never fully utilize.
Cost of building out a building, adding additional doors, adding additional crewing and staff. All right. It's on and on.
That's a great example. The number of times I've heard, oh, we have an overflow site over there, but we're going to shut it down next year. And then you call them in a year and you're like, hey, so did you ever end up shutting down that site? Well, no, we added another one. So, I mean, that's exactly it is, the supply chain pays for inefficiency and margin is what it comes down to.
Jake, expound on that. The needless buffer, the needless safety nets, more staff, more square feet, more heartburn.
Keith clearly pointed out monetarily, it's no question, it's margin points. But let's get real. The fundamental thing that we all deal with across the supply chain space today is the availability of talent to actually execute the work we need to get done when it needs to get done, right? In an efficient way, and to make it a compelling piece of work that we don't have people like going, hey, I missed Johnny's baseball game this afternoon because I had to work 3 hours because all the stuff was screwed up and we couldn't figure out the right path to get it done so I could leave and go make the game. So now I go home and I'm a heel because I'm missing an important thing, which should have been on my off time, right? So quality of work. There is a huge people element to it. It's not only training, it's the efficiency of the work, and it's the work satisfaction so that you've got a team that doesn't hate coming in and punching the clock, right?
Yeah. Keith, Jake points out a great item there because that quality of work, I think he called it, where once you act on the opportunity that clearly you're showing and illustrating the improvements that can be had, you improve that quality of work, and every day doesn't become an endless firefighting cycle where your people, your hardworking people that want to succeed, feel obligated to wear that cape each and every day and miss family time. Keith, anything else you want to add to that? That's an important part of this, I think.
Yeah, so I would add 2 comments and I'll try to ground it a little bit in reality as well, which is when you're in distribution and warehousing, so plant warehouse or distribution center, right? Service can never suffer. That's always the objective. And that's why this problem exists to begin, is like the objective of the supply chain is to deliver stuff where it needs to go when it needs to be there. And these buffers and all these costs and all these challenges that have been built up due to the disjointed nature of the system, they wouldn't exist in a perfect world because everything would just get where it needs to go. And so you'd have optimized service at optimized cost. But in a warehouse, right, that's really hard and to make it really tractable, like a plant warehouse, for example. I might have a production system that's running and I need to get raw material to production, but I don't get real-time updates on when the production schedule changes. And we're no longer in the world of production schedules changing on a weekly basis. They change minute by minute, potentially. So I need to know exactly what raw materials need to be brought to what line at what time and I only have, we'll say, 4 pallet positions at the front of every line. So I have to do it in a really tight sequence. It has to be perfectly orchestrated to get everything there. And then if we don't get it there, production shuts down. Everybody yells at us. That's, hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars that are lost, right? That's just one tractable example of data systems not being connected that ends up resulting in either a lack of service or significant addition of margin to the business, or overall costs to the business, because we either add more space on the front end, we do a lot of things to avoid these problems that just better connectivity between systems would solve.
And we're going to talk about a better way here in just a minute. We want to make sure we ground ourselves in reality. And really the next step in that, Keith and Jake, is I want to get you all to talk about the limits that traditional technology platforms and solutions, WMS, ERP, you name it, what limits they have. Keith?
Yeah. So the best way to think of it is ERP and WMS, they are built and designed to track and catalog things. WMS particularly, there's, if you use the Gartner terminology, there's levels to WMS, and some of the more advanced WMSs will also do directed work and task management to some degree, but they're not designed to optimize the overall constrained flows of a facility, right? An ERP doesn't plan in size buckets less than a day, which to me still blows my mind when you're building
integer of
ERP.
One equals 24 hours. There's
Right.
a lot of crap that happens in a 24-hour bucket.
Yeah. And like go to a warehouse and you're like, okay, this is what you're going to get done today. Well, what time do I need to get it done? Don't care. Right. And that's not how it works. And so, these systems have some, ERP, that's a significant limitation, particularly when you get to the I won't swear, but the get stuff done side of the business, which happens in distribution and warehousing. And WMSs they were initially designed for figuring out, where do I have my inventory and what inventory is going on what load, and how do I make it easier to scan something and it tells me what to do. It's not saying that I have, 4 different pick processes and they can only handle so much capacity at each time, and they all merge at an individualized sort area. And so I have to make sure that I'm flowing things through the facility perfectly optimally so that no individual area gets overrun. It's just a limitation of the system because it's a bunch of advanced mathematics that has to think further than the next 5, 10, 20 minutes into the future.
And play out scenarios, right?
Yep.
So, and Jake, continue on with that thought, whether you're talking about playing out.
Yeah, fundamentally, I always view this as, in today's age, we're playing a giant game of neural network movement, right? I want you to envision, you're looking down into the box we call a warehouse or distribution center. And you're seeing all of this myriad of movement and transactional stuff and flows and materials coming in and packaging and people movement, right? And materials coming in and out of storage positions and going to docks and accepting docks. And it's just mass chaos. And that's before I start dropping in changes. Unfortunately, the old adage, shit happens. And it happens really frequently. It's as simple as a trucker gets delayed. Just one, right? It's as simple as I run 10 minutes behind on one production line process, delivering materials that should be already at a palletizer and finished, and they're not, right? It's an unload coming in where, guess what? The guys were short one person today, and we didn't have it out so that it could be resequenced to be rerouted to the other side of the building properly. And unfortunately, we fall back into, as Keith was describing, the limitations of these individual elements that we're managing sole transactional tasks, as opposed to saying, I get it, I understand, but now I need you to take all these changes into account and tell me what's my best optimum to keep the place moving, right? So that I can make the most out of the disrupted opportunity, as opposed to just handing out money, giving away margin points.
one call out, which is like, what is the best way to visualize the gap? So anybody who's listening, there's, if you've been in a warehouse before, it's like we have the state of the art WMS and a YMS and automation and all these things. And then just ask the question, okay, if you have all of these things, why are the most used resources in a shipping office Excel, paper, a whiteboard, and brain power?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's, so what's the gap? I think the gap is those four things that have to supplement, at least emphasized by those four things that end up being people having to supplement where their operational technology falls short.
It's where the bowl of spaghetti attempts to come together with somebody putting their squishy hand in between all those moving parts.
Oh, I love y'all paint quite the picture.
What an analogy.
That's right. And one other thing I heard there from you both is when stuff happens, because it does, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every single day. The snowball effect that as all these changes and dilemmas and delays add up, if we don't take a smarter, better forward-looking approach with the technology that's available, rather than using the very limiting traditional platforms that are out there, we only make it harder on our people, right? That goes back to the earlier point, beyond the margin impact and all the other data side of the tangible impact. Okay, so let's talk about, Keith and Jake, silo busting. And this may be, we've been talking about this for years, which really goes to the heart of the opportunity we've got here. A little bit of a rhetorical question here, Keith, but how does visibility and that orchestration and that harmony that you're speaking to help eliminate those operational silos and create that powerful alignment that really can benefit the whole ecosystem?
Yeah. So there's three stages. And like, I'd love to say these are Keith Moore's 3 stages of enlightenment in a warehouse. That's not the case, right? This is a pretty standard process flow, which is, visibility, predictivity, prescription. And, they go by a lot of different names across a lot of different types of analytics and AI. But the step one is like, you got to know what's going on. And you can't just know what's going on inside of your silo, because you don't live in a siloed world, as we just got done talking about. Everything that happens outside of your silo influences what happens inside of your silo. And so you have to have a single pane of glass that you can look at that tells you the current state of reality and goes as far into the future of like what you know about the future as possible. And in practice, what that means in a distribution or a plant warehouse environment is you need your production data, your warehouse data. So that's both, finished goods and raw material, your labor data, your automation data, your location data, your trailer data, all in one place. So that at any point in a day, you can look and you say, what is the current state of things, right? This isn't getting into predictive. This isn't getting into prescriptive. But that's what, to answer the base question, we'll get into the, what is prescriptive and orchestrated mean? Yep. I'm guessing in the future, but
my simplified translation of that is I need to be able to do data ingestion from all of my siloed units so that I can actually pull together the threads that hold them together and that will impact each other.
One pane of glass. Best way to put it. Yeah.
Okay. And that's step one, Keith, correct?
That's correct. That's just step one.
Okay. Do you want to, let's go ahead and put a little more meat on the bone for all 3 steps. And then we're going to dive a little deeper, especially as it relates to layering the technology on top or AI in a moment. But let's talk about step 2.
Step 2 is productivity, right? If I know where we are, do I know what's going to happen? If you're looking at a warehouse and you say, hey, I'm working 20 loads right now, all of them are due in the next 2 hours, and I have 20 more that we haven't started working that are also due in the next 2 hours. Somebody looking at it could say, hey, we're probably going to be late on some of those, right? So step 2 is being able to look at this data, look at known boundaries and conditions inside of your facility and start to predict. This is that wargaming that Jake kind of talked about, is you're doing this scenario modeling to say, given where we are and the objectives of the business, and every warehouse says my objective is to maximize service and minimize costs. That's not true, believe it or not. Everybody's willing to make a service cost trade-off at some point. It's really just how many dollars and what is the service level. And so you're doing that optimization to say, what is going to happen and what are the most probabilistic outcomes based on what I know now. The further you get into the future, the harder that is, right? I can tell you definitely what's going to happen in an hour. I can tell you without anything breaking what's going to happen in 5 hours or by the end of next shift. But if you ask me right now to tell you what's going to happen next Easter Sunday in a warehouse, not the one that's however many days into the future that is, some 200, 300 something days, like I have no idea, right? And so like you need that second level of predictivity to identify what are the probabilities of what's going to happen in my facility.
Keith, it's kind of like the hurricane modeling, right?
That's exactly it.
It's advanced. It's incredible what goes on now with weather prediction and especially with hurricane season. But to your point, kind of like what you're talking about, they can tell you where any given hurricane, it's right. But as time goes further into the distance, that cone gets a lot bigger. Jake, we're talking about the first two steps here, visibility and then predictability. What else would you add about step two?
In step two, honestly, this is where you start to get beyond what I'll call even our best people and what they're capable of doing of projecting. Because when you have so many bullets flying around you from all the changes, right? You're trying to absorb as much as you feasibly can and make a projection of the path to get the most work done, the most efficient way at the optimal outcome, right? And so that's where you're starting to augment that gut reality of, well, I've had this happen to us in the past, and what we've typically tried to work our way through is we do X, Y, and Z, right? Well, maybe it's X, Y, and Z to the power of 2 because these are the 2 nuances that you haven't been hit with before, right? So this predictability piece is about being able to get out in front of the issues, right? Yes, I can go firefight all day long. And by the way, we have people who are masters at daily, exceptional, one-off firefighting. The problem is, strangely enough, you never get out of the firefight. It just is replaced by yet another burning bush, right? So the objective here is to say, how do I get us course corrected back towards what I'll call a norm should be, right? And what's the path to be able to achieve that? How do I sequence all these pieces to make that possible? So that's that first piece.
I like it, Jake, and kind of what you touched on there. One of many things my dear friend Kim Reuter was talking about. Yeah, we do a bad job empowering all the firefighters, but let's empower the fire preventers, right?
Yep.
All right. So Keith, we talked about the visibility. We've talked about predictability. What is the third step?
And this is where AI kind of starts to come into play is that third step, IBM definition, prescriptivity, but I like to call it orchestration, which is that is where you are actually making decisions to optimize outcomes in the future. So you're saying, and this is everything has a cost. In reality, that's the case, right? It's very often difficult to quantify the cost. So if I go to somebody that's running a warehouse and say, all right, how late are you willing to make an outbound to get an additional pallet on that outbound? So if you're going to short a Walmart, are you willing to wait an hour? Are you willing to wait 2 hours? What about 3? Eventually somebody's got a line, right? Nope, we'll eventually just ship it. And so this third step, this orchestration is now that we have all of this data, now that we're able to do this scenario modeling to figure out where the world's going to break and where my bottlenecks are going to be, I need to then start to make trade-offs and decision to optimize outcomes. And at the end of the day, that optimized outcome is some combination of maximize service, minimize cost. Am I willing to ship something late to ensure that I have the labor to keep the production line running? And the answer is maybe, right? Am I going to start loading trucks out even though they're not needed for 2 days because I don't have any space in the building? Those are the decisions that you end up having to make. And that's that orchestration layer on top, which is, Jake mentioned, people are generally pretty good at building rules on, hey, don't ship things late, make sure that we get all the product on there. But when you get all the way down into the weeds, right, you want to do that on an item by item level, a customer by customer level. You need to account for all of these. This is a very complex multivariate time series problem. to use some of the technical terms. And and you want to be able to do that continuously, because as soon as something breaks, what I think is going to happen in the future changes, right? If a truck shows up late, I need to adapt my behavior to account for that. And that's what orchestration does. And that's really the AI enabled piece.
What I want to be able to do out of this third piece, and what they do so well, is they create calm out of the chaos.
Yes.
I create calm out of the chaos because I have taken the prescriptive steps to create a cadence of activities where the people running the operations know what to execute next without having to stop and wait.
Yep.
Did you see there? And I love that, calm out of the chaos. But did y'all hear there, or for folks listening or watching from home, Jake was providing his own rhythmic sound effects, and I just heard the cadence of a smooth organization there. Good stuff, Jake. So visibility, predictability, and then to use your word, which I like your word better, orchestration. Keith, love that. And we're going to be diving into more in future conversations on those three steps and a whole bunch more. All right, AI, the golden age, the darling poster child, perhaps, of this golden age of supply chain tech, and for good reason, right? Because beyond all the hype, it's making a massive impact. So, Keith, what is AI's role in all of this, especially in integrating, predicting, and optimizing distribution workflows?
Yeah, so I have to define it first, which is AI by nature is replicating human behavior with computation. So the intent is we are replicating what a person could do at person quality or better, right? With computation, which means it needs to be dynamic. There needs to ideally be some measure of change based on input. So data plus compute equals output in this case. And I realize that's vague, but when somebody says, like, do you use AI? They might mean generative AI. They might mean machine learning. They might mean advanced, dynamic optimizations. And so the field of AI is really broad. And as it applies to logistics for this particular problem of orchestration, this is what's called a combinatorial optimization problem, which you're like, okay, well, hold on, zoom out for a second, which is think of chess. So chess is a pretty simple game. There's 16 pieces you control. There's 64 squares on the board. By the time you are 3 moves into a game of chess, there are hundreds of millions of ways that game could have been played. And there are more ways to play a game of chess than there are atoms in the universe, which sounds pretty insane for the fact there's only 64 places you can put a piece and 16 pieces you control. Now expand that out to a warehouse and say, I have thousands of pallet positions, maybe tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of pallet positions, hundreds of people that I'm controlling, lots of doors, maybe automation. We are playing, the ultimate game of combinatorial optimization to say, what do I do next? Given there's an infinite number of ways to run a warehouse. And so what the AI is doing is it is actually looking through all of the different potential options for running that facility, not just for the next 5 minutes, but for the next day, 2 days, based on all known information. And it is coming up with, maybe it's not the absolute perfect plan, but this is going to be one of the 10 best options out of everything in the potential universe for running your facility. Oh, and by the way, when something breaks in 5 minutes, we're going to do it all over again.
And I can't just do that by gut feel, Scott.
So true. So, especially my favorite part of that scenario Keith was painting with all the permutations, which I think is only the second time I've ever used that word. I learned in math way back in the day. Is the dynamic aspect of that, right? Because how cool would it be if we could set a plan on Monday and it still be great by Friday, but that's not reality, kind of to what you all both were talking about earlier. So it's amazing. It truly is nothing short of amazing of how we're leveraging AI. Jake, comment though on the scenario Keith was talking about and where AI fits in and is powering this truly next generation. It's current generation, but for a lot of organizations, it's next generation stuff. Your thoughts, Jake?
The truth is we haven't but simply scratched the surface of all the areas of how we'll employ AI to help us empower better operating results. Now, the great news is what Keith has described is actually available now. And it's an augmentation over the top of what I already have that's existing. Simplistically, having run large scale supply chains, the last thing I really want to do is spend a lot of time and effort kind of ripping and replacing a lot of the things that I'm using for those individual activities, right? Because I spent a lot of money, time, resources, getting it in place, right? Teaching people work processes, all that stuff. So if I'm able to use the power of AI in this case to actually augment those processes where I don't have to go back and rip and replace, but I get the benefit of using the power of it to improve my outcome and my results, that's heaven.
Yes. Undoubtedly, it's getting our cake and eating it too. And Keith, to steal from Jake there, it is available now. We're not talking 2030. We're talking right there. So I want to bring it all together, right? Because I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that we've been kind of speaking to a little bit piece by piece throughout the conversation thus far. But this is what you and the AutoScheduler team do.
Yep.
Right. So what does a real intelligent dynamic logistics platform look like in action? And tell us more about not just the tangible benefits, but the intangible benefits.
Yeah. So what does this look like in action, right? This is a layer on top of existing systems is the first call out, right? The whole intent and how we started this was how do we harmonize all of the data that we already have? Most people don't want to implement new systems because it's like open heart surgery on their existing operation. That's not the intent whatsoever. So you're taking and harmonizing all of this data across all of your systems. If you were to deploy something like an AutoScheduler onto your network, it is then continuously dynamically running. It understands exactly how each site needs to operate, right? Site number 1 may stage, site number 2 may not. Site number 3 has a weird production setup, and site number 4 isn't a rectangle. And so we need to account for all of this uniqueness of doors and the fact that some are, automated loaders and some aren't, right? It's configurable to where when we're modeling a site inside of our platform, it is tuned to that site to understand how that site operates and how it runs. It is then continuously, and continuous in nature is, some sites every 10 minutes, some sites every hour, but it is looking at all data available, building that plan, identifying where the bottlenecks are, telling you exactly, the what, when, where, and who. So what do you need to do? When do you need to do it? Where does it need to be done? And who is going to be doing it, whether a person or automation? And then the optimal is this is fully orchestrated. So we have some sites that even have this, harmonized data advisory control layer that people can make decisions off of. And some of them are even just automating straight back into existing systems. We'll automate yard moves. We'll automate waiving, automation, work queue management inside of the warehouse management system. You go from, we used to hand out work inside of a facility to, we're moving towards the warehouse of the future, which is, the man and the dog. The man's there to feed the dog. The dog's there to make sure the man doesn't touch anything. So people inside of facilities are able to spend their valuable time on fighting actual fires and not on the management of overall orchestration of work. And that's in, what everything I just said outside of the man and the dog is insights today. So this is deployed. This is a done deal. We're network wide at, companies like P&G, companies like PepsiCo or Frito-Lay specifically. So we have a lot of really good use cases and proven outcomes at this point.
So what you're saying there, Keith, is you'd love to talk with the folks that want to kick the tires and be good skeptics, constructive skeptics, because you've got the proof.
We do.
And I bet you welcome those conversations, don't you, Keith?
Certainly do. We have a great team, and we love what we do, right? We're really good at it. My team is extremely good at not just the delivery of the software, but the change management tied to it. Realizing, when you talk about bringing AI to something like warehousing, there is a huge component of change management. People need to learn what the future needs to be sometimes. And that's part of what we deliver as well. So it's, we consider ourselves partner to every organization we work with, not experts that need to tell people how to do their job.
Scott, I've been at it for multiple decades, and I can tell you one of the other things is it's a perfect illustration to me of, a principle I live by about saying, hey, I've got to be on a constant learning journey, right? Fundamentally, I learned by the use of the capability how to look at how I set targets and objectives between operations differently. You think about it, you step back and you go, wait a minute, I've got 30 plus years of experience. I can operate all the equipment. I've got the gut instinct I've built from all the possible failures and all that stuff. And yet I'll tell you, I was like a kid in kindergarten when I'm actually learning for the first time what were the nuances that were the real reasons why performance in first location versus fourth location were distinctly different, even though they had same throughput, same size facilities, same product makeup, same customer mix, all that stuff. And you're going, I should have known that, right? I should. It's just too much, right? To be able to absorb and try and delineate to get it down to those kind of tangible realities.
It takes a different approach, a different technology, a different way of looking at your ecosystem to find, Jake, as you were saying earlier, that calm out of the myriad of chaos. And it's so, so true. There's a better way. Keith, I really have enjoyed the picture you've painted here today. And again, we're gonna make sure folks know how to connect with you and the AutoScheduler team in just a second. But before we do that, and before we get Jake's patented key takeaway, I got to ask you, as a fellow entrepreneur, we got a strong entrepreneurial contingent within our global audience, which is the smartest in all the world. Or if they're not active entrepreneurs, that's what they aspire to be, much like you earlier in your journey. Mm-hmm. If you had a piece or two of advice that you would extend to those folks that are in the trenches, or they're trying to come up with the right idea, or whatever it is, wherever they are in their entrepreneurial journey, what would that advice be?
Yeah, it's foundationally simple, but it's something that somebody told me, and it's part of why AutoScheduler has been successful so far, which is find a problem someone is willing to pay you to solve and solve it. A lot of companies are like, we're going to go build out this massive technology and invest very heavily and raise all this money. And the reality is, like, particularly in logistics and supply chain, people pay for solved problems, full stop. And so starting a company can be a consulting engagement to say, what are your problems? Here's my expertise. How can I build you something that I can retain the intellectual property for that will solve your problem? And you use that as a springboard. You can iterate on that. It doesn't have to be this massive capital intensive thing that you end up doing. And particularly given the markets these days, right? Raising capital is extremely difficult right now. And so really would advocate for anybody trying to start a company, starting small, finding somebody that's willing to pay for you to solve a problem, go do that, figure out how to rinse, wash, and repeat.
I love it. That sounds like $1 billion advice to me. Find that problem first. It's not, and I love this beautiful simplicity in that. It doesn't have to be the chicken and the egg when it comes to problem and solution. Find the problem first. Jake, before we make sure folks know how to connect with Keith, you want to comment on that $1 billion advice from Keith Moore?
It's spot on. Fundamentally, supply chain is gainful lifetime employment because there's always another problem. As soon as you fix one, there's another one. And it's because we live in a dynamic business environment. Markets change, client channels through which we sell change, product mix, product innovation, all those things influence. So it's a constant mixing bowl, right, that you're trying to put together and figure out what to do with. My fundamental takeaway for today is just, hey, it's refreshing to actually see the ability to simplistically apply new age tech in a way that makes operational sense.
That sounds like an excellent, terrific key takeaway here today, a patented key takeaway from Jake Barr, the John Wayne of global supply chain. Well said, Jake. Keith, and you were as advertised. When we were getting in here earlier today, Jake said, I tell you, Keith is found at that unique intersection of folks that get the brilliant technology and can talk the technology talk. And better yet, they know how supply chain works. And that intersection can be found some amazing.
He's a supply chain geek. He really is. It's the amazing thing. When you can find people like that who actually know how the work is done in an operation.
Yep.
You're no longer a techie. You're part of the fraternity.
Oh, I love that. And Keith, I bet you embrace that supply chain geek a term of endearment, don't you?
I do. It's actually a requirement at our company, which is everybody has to know how the business works.
Oh, I love that.
Whether you know how the tech works or not, you need to know how the business works. So we have constant sessions with engineers that work on back-end technologies on how to differentiate when case and layer pick setups need to be changed, right? So yes, that is innate to who we are as an organization.
Okay, I love that. That kind of reminds me of Yossi Sheffi was writing here recently about how no matter what business you're in, every manager, every leader, it'd be best for him or her to know how supply chain operates. Mm-hmm. And I tend to agree with him. Okay, so Keith Moore, first off, how can folks reach out and connect with you? Let's talk about Gartner in just a second, but let's get the basics first. How can folks connect with you, Keith?
Sure. Add me on LinkedIn. Easiest way. Keith Moore, CEO of AutoScheduler.
It's just that easy. Okay. And you are going to be at Gartner Supply Chain Symposium along with me and Jake and the whole gang. I bet the whole crew, AutoScheduler.AI crew is going to be down there. That is, let's see, that's May 5th, 6th, and 7th in Orlando.
Yep.
And to all of our wonderful audience members out there, if you're there, if you're one of the fortunate 4,000 or so lucky souls there, Keith, I bet you'd love to share a cup of coffee or an adult beverage, huh?
I would. So if you're going to be there, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to spend some time, whether it's just talking about your problems or obviously would love to tell anybody about AutoScheduler.
Or in Barcelona.
Or in Barcelona. That's correct. Later in May.
Okay. You're going to be at both, Keith. Is that right?
Yeah. It's going to be a busy spring for me.
All right. Send pictures. I'm going to see you in Orlando. But I have not had the good fortune to make it to Barcelona yet, so I'm jealous of you and Jake. But I look forward to hearing all about it. Okay, so big thanks. Keith Moore, CEO with AutoScheduler.AI. Folks, reach out to Keith on LinkedIn. And Keith, your URL, where can folks find you on the web?
AutoScheduler.AI.
Oh, it's
very
just that easy. Yeah, it's just that easy, man. Well, Keith, always a pleasure. It's great to reconnect with you here after a great session in ProMat. And Jake Barr, really enjoyed your perspective on Keith and what they're doing over at AutoScheduler. I really enjoyed you being here as well today.
Anybody that can actually take my gut instinct and actually make it better is even better.
Oh, man, the praise is effusive here today, Keith Moore. Well, hey, I look forward to seeing y'all both at Gartner in Orlando. And to our audience, hey, I hope you enjoyed quite the conversation over the last hour. There are tons of actionable insights, and better yet, we answered why from about 1 million different perspectives here today, why we've got to change how we use and leverage and deploy tech out in our warehousing industry, distribution centers, fulfillment centers, you name it. Reach out to Keith. You won't be disappointed there. But most importantly, your homework is this. Take one thing you heard here from Keith or Jake, put it into practice. It's all about deeds, not words. Let's change how business is done, if for no other reason than for our people out there. But with all that said, on behalf of the Supply Chain Now team, Scott Luton challenging you to do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And we'll see you next time, right back here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Join the Supply Chain Now community for more supply chain perspectives, news, and innovation. Check out supplychainnow.com, subscribe to Supply Chain Now on YouTube, and follow and listen to Supply Chain Now wherever you get your podcasts.